Welcome back, everybody, to the Sick Podcast, Recruits Draftcast. We have a very fun show in store for you today. We're going to be delving into the best defenseman draft classes this century. So looking at 2000 and up, we're going to be talking about which draft class had the best defenseman, and could the 2024 draft class surpass the best one? We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be delving into Rocco's Riser of the Week as per usual. We have our Prospect of the Week, and for every Habs fan watching, you know we got you with our Habs Prospect of the Week. So let's get started.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Recruits Draftcast.
And with the first overall selection in the 2023 NHL Draft, the Chicago Blackhawks are very proud to select from the Regina Pats, the Western Hockey League, Connor Bedard.
The sickest NHL draft and scouting podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Producer Shayne here, joined by my fantastic co-host, as per usual, Grant McCagg, Rocco Zappia. Fellas, how we doing?
Great. How you doing?
Can't complain.
Back to being fantastic. You needed that break from me, eh?
I'm recharged, and I feel great. I feel great.
Oh,
Your tan's gone.
Yeah, it was never there, anyways. I burn. I don't tan, but it was very fun. But as I said, I am very glad to be back with you guys, and I think this show is going to be very fun as well. Being a defenseman myself, I played D for about 10 years, never at a high level. I wasn't very good, but nonetheless, I love talking about defensemen. And this draft class in particular is just special, really, really special. And why don't we pull up your most recent rankings here? Because the recruits rankings currently have 6 defensemen in the top 10. That's big. Right. I was looking at the past draft classes starting from 2000 and up. Most of them had 3 in the top 10. Now, 2012 is the outlier with 8. They didn't all turn out very good, but we know 2012 draft class. But 6 defensemen in the top 9, actually. So let's talk about that before we get to the other draft classes. Why do we think that this one could be the best? Anybody?
Well,
yeah. This guy has the high end and the depth. Really, it has both factors that you'd be looking for to what would make it a very strong class. You have some very, very high end players. There's some guys with some extremely high upside, and then you also have a few really safe guys who you are pretty sure, unless something goes really wrong, that they're going to have very, very long careers too. And that's part of it too. It's not just the high end, but also the depth that gives us reason to maybe talk about a bunch of teenagers competing with some of the best defensive classes that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We
could maybe bring up that we have a stat showing the point totals for comparing 2000. Okay, here it is. Now this is over, 68 games in the OHL, 72 games in the WHL, what they project their point totals to be. And if you'll notice, now this is stacked up against 2008, which I think a lot of people consider to be the probably the primo draft class, defense draft class of the century so far. And if you look and notice that Dickinson, Yakimchuk, and Perek are all on pace to score more points than any of the defense, the CHL, the high-end guys that went in that draft class. Doughty, Pietrangelo, Bogosian, Del Zotto, more points than all of them. So just in that regard alone, the offensive potential of this draft class is extremely high. And then that's not even getting into the Levshunov and Boyum, which I threw in at the bottom there. Levshunov 7th overall among all defensemen in points per game as a freshman in college, and Boyum 2nd behind a kid named Lane Hudson that you may have heard of. But I mean, just that group alone is just tells you that the offensive potential of the top end guys in this draft class is equal to any that we've seen so far this century.
That's it. And we didn't even mention Anton Silyev, who's this 6'7" giant.
Exactly.
I mean, this particular draft class, defenseman wise, and you know, this we're only looking at the top talent here, because the depth, there's even more. You know, Adam Jiricek, like you could keep going here. It's very, very impressive, and it could turn out to be one of the best. But Grant, you mentioned 2003, 2008. If we can bring up 2003, just to give comparison, in that draft class, right? We kind of split up the tiers here, but you know, Shea Weber, Brent Burns, Dustin Byfuglien, Dion Phaneuf, Brent Seabrook. I mean, this is an insane draft class, and you can see there the Norris winners. But 2008 here, 2008 might be the best one, and maybe not for long, but Erik Karlsson, Drew Doughty, Roman Josi, Alex Pietrangelo, and
John
Karlsson. John Karlsson. That is insane.
That's insane. Pretty wild. Three Norris winners, a guy that's got 2 Stanley Cups, one as captain, and John Karlsson, who's been second best offensive defenseman after Eric, really, of that era, maybe top 3 anyways. Razor, so like, and he's the 5th best of that class. Like, that's, if this class somehow ends up better than that one, that'd be something special, because that's an all-time list, like four Hall of Famers there,
easily,
probably. So, you know, Karlsson was you know, in the voting for Norris. He came close. Pietrangelo's been you know, runner up or close to it in the Norris voting as well, and
he's got a ring. He's got a ring,
right? A couple of rings. He led the NHL in defense scoring the year with St. Louis that they won the cup, and arguably could have been the, you know, as good a choice for the Conn Smythe as O'Reilly that year. So I mean, but then also the depth. You look at
exactly.
You know, there's some pretty solid defensemen. Even when you get down to, like, you start to get down to the last 19, 20 there, Demers and Borowiecki, Brody, Stones, kind of like all solid careers, you know. So it's it had the quality and the quantity, and I mean, if you look at this year's class, probably a month or two ago, I was thinking, you know, this might end up being the best draft class of a defense draft class of the 2000s so far. Since then, I had a good look at it, and you know, there's some guys like Kiva Harju who we've done a deeper dive on, and Henry Muse, and a few guys that were maybe more highly regarded earlier on, that as time's gone along here, I think we've seen the warts in their games, and they're maybe not as highly touted as we originally thought. So perhaps the depth after the top 6 guys isn't as good as I thought at one time, and I don't think there's going to be as many guys going to top 32 as I originally thought in the fall. But I mean, there's a pile of 6'3" plus right defensemen that could all be, you know, anywhere from 3s to 6s on a defense core. I mean, second pairing right defensemen, there might be 15 of them in this draft class. So there's going to be quality, because the top 6 guys, obviously, if they're ranked in their top 10, they're highly regarded. They could all be stars. And then there's quantity as well. There's good depth. So I think this draft class, the defense draft class, could shape up to be the best of the 2000s so far. And that's, if it ends up being better than 2008, that's going to be quite a there's going to be a lot of happy teams a few years down the road.
One thing I like about this year, and now I'm pretty high on this class. It's tough to say. It's tough to say that they'd ever be better than 08, and we wouldn't even be able to have that discussion for 10 more years, sort of thing.
Right.
Just because of how good 08 was. But the one thing I really do like about this one, especially at the top, those top 6 guys, they're all just a little bit different. They're none two of them are exactly the same. They're all bringing a slightly different element to the game, or variations of similar elements, but not quite identical, sort of thing. So I feel like that kind of makes it more interesting, because it gives you really something to debate and talk about, because they're so different. Personal preference, I think, is gonna come into play a lot more. You hear every year say, every fan base says this till they're blue in the face. Oh, we just take the best player available, and then they take the guy that they don't want, and they're mad at their team because that's not the best guy in their minds. But there's a lot of nuance to that, and I'm not sure that's going to be the case as much this year, just because it's like, okay, take Saleev and Perek, for example. They couldn't be more different, but both have the ability to be so elite at what they do and what their game is. But you talk to 5 different guys, and you'll get 5 different answers on where they think they're gonna end up. Right? I don't know that there's any sort of consensus in the ranking amongst these top end defensemen, and I've seen every list that exists on the internet, and any single combination of these names, I've seen them in every different order that's even possible. And that, I think, makes it really cool and really fun to watch, because you're going to get to see at the draft table. Well, the last time we'll ever have a draft table, because the last time they're doing it in person, but on the draft floor, you're going to get to see exactly what teams are prioritizing what skill sets, because each guy is a little bit unique in what they bring.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about that. And that's what makes it even more fun, in my opinion.
Exactly.
I love that.
It's going to be tough to top 2008, though. When you talk about them being different, like 2008 had Pietrangelo, Del Zotto, and Scandella. Now, what does this draft? Does this draft have what's different in this draft to that one? No Italians at the top. So
cue the music.
So there's no way it can be as good.
No,
there you go.
That's my point exactly. I don't think Rocco will ever admit that it's a better draft class in 2008.
Well, Celebrini should go first, so there is one decent Italian there.
We got to give you guys something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, yeah, but there are 2 more draft classes that come to mind that are worth highlighting, but too soon to deem the best, right? So 2018 had Rasmus Dahlin, Quinn Hughes, Evan Bouchard, Noah Dobson, Keandre Miller, Sean Dursey, to name a few, right? That could end up being up there as well. Even 2021 is looking pretty good. I mean, Owen Power, Luke Hughes, Simon Edvinsson, Brant Clark, Olin Zellweger, Logan Mailloux, JJ Moser, to name a few. We've been very privileged in terms of defenseman draft classes recently, and this year is no different. It could be the best one. So let us know in the comments if you think the 2024 draft class could be the best defenseman draft class ever. There's a very real possibility. Right now, I think we're all in agreement that it's still 2008, but man, this one's very exciting. Let's just say that.
This draft class hasn't surpassed 2008 yet. No. Considering they haven't played a game in the NHL yet, but
exactly.
And I mean, even when you were mentioning 2018, your 6th, you got the Sean Dursey. I mean, there better be 6 defensemen better than Sean Dursey in this draft class.
I was waiting for you to jump all over that. As soon as you said Sean Dursey, I'm like, here we go.
I like Sean Dursey, but I mean, a throw in by the Leafs in a trade. I mean, holy geez.
He's doing pretty good this season with
he is.
You got to give him his flowers, but
you're right. But if Boyum or Levchunov don't end up being better than Sean Dursey, then we've severely overestimated this draft class.
No, depth wise, I think this year,
and that's no slight to Sean Dursey. He's he's a better defenseman than you and I ever were, Shayne.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. All right. All right. So it's time for Rocco's Riser of the Week. Cue the music. Okay.
We got the fucking beak down on the record, or it was a little.
Yeah. Rocco, this week you are highlighting Riley Patterson. Talk to us about him.
So we got Riley Patterson, center for the Barrie Colts, but he plays a lot of wing as well. I have him as a center right winger. He played both in the game that I watched. This game's against my hometown team, the Ottawa 67s. He looked quite good against it. So he's 6 foot, about 190 pounds, offensive player. It's his first year in the OHL. He played junior A last season with the North York Rangers, put up quite good numbers. He's got 23 goals and 51 points in 53 games this year, but 11 of those goals and 25 of those points have come just in the last 16 games. So he's caught fire a bit of late. Started slow, and I read a few different articles that maybe suggested he had a little bit of a tougher time adapting to the speed of the OHL game and how to find those pockets that he was used to having at the junior A level. So that could explain his slower start. Or he could just be on a really good hot streak right now. We're going to have to wait and see. But he has picked it up a lot of late. He's tied for first in OHL rookie scoring right now. Mm-hmm. Like I said, he plays both center and wing in this game. I could see him going either way as a pro. I kind of like him a little more as a winger, but to be determined. He's very speedy and a pretty dangerous offensive player. His skating is definitely a plus attribute for him, both in terms of his straight line speed as well as his quickness and his ability to get up to speed. Equal parts goal scorer and playmaker. I'd say maybe leaning slightly towards a shooter a little bit, but I mean, he's pretty balanced in his stats throughout his career at most levels. So he can do it both ways. He seems to make pretty good reads with the puck on when to pass and when to shoot. Doesn't really force either too much. But he's got a really, really quick release and a good velocity on his shot. He can beat goalies from distance. There's a clip in here. He rings one off the bar at some point that you'll see. A really, really quick shot. Effort level could be a little bit inconsistent in the games that I've seen. Sometimes he's going really hard all over the puck. Sometimes he can cheat defensively a little bit, looking for a quick strike offensive chance. Guilty of throwing a soft poke check or looking to make a tougher pass across the ice rather than just chipping the puck out and playing it safe. So that's something he's got to work out a little bit, but that's not super uncommon for a more offensive-driven player, especially as a teenager. I'd like him to be a little bit more deliberate when he's trying to get the puck out, a little harder on those clearing attempts. He can be guilty of giving like little soft clears, which gives the defenseman a chance to keep it in. Couple turnovers near the defensive blue line that I wasn't crazy about. But again, those are all things that he's kind of looking, to me anyways, it seems like he's looking to go offense first and just a little bit more attention to detail there, because at times it seems a little bit careless. But when he's on, he's playing really well. And the times when he does get the puck out and he's trying to be a little cute with it, it does go the other way and he gets chances. So I can see why he's doing those things, but stuff that won't really fly at the pro level. When he's engaged defensively, he can be quite effective. His speed helps a lot in the defensive play. I find him better at defending open ice. He defends open ice really well, can keep up one-on-one with his guys, has a really good stick, which he uses to break up loose pucks. Tougher along the boards for him, not quite as strong defending along the boards and down low as he is in open ice. But again, I think that's just a little bit more commitment to being a little bit harder and in those dirtier areas. Needs to be a little bit more aware in his decision making. At times, he can sometimes try to force things. And again, I think this just goes back to him being an offensive player, where he's trying to make things happen rather than making the best play that's available. So again, those things can be coached, but they are areas to be concerned about. And again, at this point in the draft, we're talking players that do have flaws, so they're not going to be perfect by any means. He does anticipate the play quite well, with and without the puck, actually. He gets himself into the right positions to be involved in the play, and he seems to be kind of around the puck a lot, even if he's not necessarily coming out with 50-50 battles or getting the pucks out when he should all the time. Attention to detail does need a little bit of work in that sense, but there is some upside here as a scoring line player because he does have a lot of offensive ability. He's got the speed, he's got the skill, he's got the shot, he's got the playmaking ability. So very, 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 very typical scouting report for a teenage high-skill offensive player where there's just the details need to be cleaned up and the commitment to the tougher areas of the ice need to be cleaned up a little bit. But with that commitment, and again, maybe he's a little bit later developer because it's his first year in the league. He didn't play major junior last year, so every guy's curve is a little bit different. And if he can work out those little warts in his game that are there is a lot to like about the package of skating and puck skills and offensive ability that exists. For now, I've got a third round grade on him right now, and I could realistically see him anywhere from the late second to early fourth would be reasonable in my mind. There's a pretty big cohort of players in that range, and I think he's got the upside and the tools that you'd want to take him in the top half of the draft, but he does have some warts and flaws that are going to, far from a first round discussion sort of thing. But overall, I like this player and what he's able to bring to the table. If he can harness it in, there's definitely a toolbox to work with here with him.
Yeah, a good point about it being his rookie OHL season. Like the parts of his game that he needs to work on, considering that he's an OHL rookie. Like if you're looking at a lot of kids in their first year, they have a lot of the same things that they need to work on, right? So presumably 2 more years of development in the O, and hopefully, I think since he's been put on a line with Baudouin, we've seen a real jump in his production in his game too.
Big time.
And maybe Baudouin's work habits and consistency and competitiveness are rubbing off a bit on him. So it might be a good thing if he spends the next 2 years playing on a line with with as a competitive a kid as Baudouin. It might, hopefully it rubs off on him, right, in a good way.
And they're close in points now too. Baudouin's got 4 points up on him now only, and he had quite a big gap. So since he's got on that line, I noticed right when he started like his hot streak sort of thing, his minutes took a jump from about 13, 14 a night, and now he's in that 18 to 20 range. And since I took one, he had one big, I think it was a 3-point game, one big 3-point game. In the next game, he got a ton of ice. And since then, he's been just absolutely lights out on fire. And again, I don't want to sound like I was ripping the flaws in his game too hard, because I do think they're common, they're typical, they're fixable. There's nothing about the toolbox that's not to like. It's just choose to get better at that parts of the game, and if you do that, you're going to be all right.
Well, I mean, it's because there are some questions that he's likely not going to go till the third round. You like to have fewer maybe questions on his play away from the puck, his competitiveness. Will they come, and because of that, maybe the floor is not as high as a lot of guys that are going to end up being picked in the second round.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a point that I wanted to make, is the difference between the ceiling and floor. The first rounders are the first rounders. In the second round, teams are really happy if they can get a full-time NHL player, and you see a lot of high floor guys going in that second round. Yeah. Whereas a guy like Patterson, I see the full spectrum for him. I could see him developing into a scoring line player at the NHL level, and I could equally see him not playing in the league at all. So right. there's a very big discrepancy onto what the ceiling versus the floor is of this player. And to Grant's point, I think that was the reason, because the floor is essentially non-existent. That keeps him out of the top 60 for me, which is why I put the third round grade on him. But it wouldn't be, I might be a little surprised, but I wouldn't think a team was absolutely like batty to to say, okay, this is a package we can work with, and maybe he goes towards the end of the second round if he really looks good in the playoffs and he keeps this offensive pace up the rest of the year. There is a possibility. There's only 10 games left in the regular season, but there's a lot of hockey to be played still. So he has a chance to continue moving up. But based on where he was ranked, most lists, including our own for most of the season, he's definitely risen up these last since really mid-January. He's really been on particular fire. So
yeah, that's what happens when you're Rocco's riser of the week. You rise up the rankings. So Riley Patterson, good on him. He's been doing well. Rocco's riser of the week. Now on to our prospect of the week. And
easier to pronounce his name too.
Yeah, debatable. Don't come at me in the comments if I screw this up. This is on Grant, okay? But nonetheless, Alexander Plesovsky. Let's talk about him. I think I did okay there.
Well, perfect. Yeah. I happened to watch, there was a tournament, a U18, well, they call it a Four Nations tournament, I guess, that had Russia's U18 team, Russia's U20 team, which didn't have all of their top guys like Daniel Boot and Simashev and those guys. Gulyayev weren't there, but a lot of them, Chernyshov and a few others were there. I watched that tournament, and it was games that have not been put up on Instat, but I happened to catch the games, and this kid was on the top line. Now, he's not ranked high on Central Scouting. I think he's 109 on the international list. So it's not somebody... And then Bob didn't have him ranked, and nobody'd been talking about him. So I hadn't noticed him or seen him or scouted him before that. I saw him at that tournament, but he was playing on the top line with Surin, and really stood out. Now, NHL scouts, not like I say, haven't been able to look at that tournament because it's not been put up on Instats. But luckily enough, I caught the games of the U18 team, and he impressed me. So I went back and I had a look, and this first game that I highlight here with him there, he just scored. He scored the tying goal here. Very good in front of the net, but look at the hands on him to get that, tip it out of the air. And then he went in and he got it, deposited in the net. But this kid's, he's 6'2" and about 174. So there's growth potential there. He's gonna need to put on some weight. Wouldn't call him a great skater yet, but again, I think it's mostly strength related. He just needs to get stronger. He's an August birthday, which is always intriguing too for these tall, skinny kids that you presume are going to put on some beef over the next couple of years and get stronger, and then they're skating and their overall game will improve. But in this game against the Russia under-20s, which had Chernyshov on it, and he's like a top 20 ranked player, he was excellent. He scored that goal. They ended up upsetting the Russia under-20 team, beating them 2-1, and he was a large part of it. But you'll notice him here in all these highlights. He goes to the net. He plays with some jam. He threw 4 or 5 hits in this game and was really impactful. He scored that big goal, right? The one that tied it up. He's on the ice at the end of the game. But what I like most about this kid is he plays a North American style. He's not a typical Russian draft prospect that he already plays a 200-foot game. He plays very competitively. And this is with him being a skinny and needing to mature. So I think he's only going to become more of a physical presence as he goes on. Now, I find, and you'll notice in these highlights, that he's a really smart player. He makes smart decisions. He plays well defensively, all 3 zones, actually. He loves going to the net, as you just saw in that highlight. He parks himself right in the crease and is good at deflecting pucks and good at staying there and competing with the defenseman to hold his position. I I think the most impressive thing that I found with him is his motor. He just is always going. And you'll notice in this one segment here, this shift, he's just doesn't stop. He's so again, that's not typical for a Russian prospect. Usually you're looking more at skill than at the high competitive nature. But this guy never stops moving. He's very competitive. And again, he puts on some weight and even improves his endurance even more. I think he'll be he to me has all of the tools to be an ideal and effective bottom six player at the NHL level if he comes over, if he develops right and all of the stuff. But for me, I see him as a kid that after the third round, he's likely still going to be on the board because I don't think he's on the radar. I mean, Bob doesn't have him in his top 100. Central's got him basically as an undrafted guy at this point. No one has him ranked that I've seen other than us. We've got him now. I put him squarely into the fourth round or perhaps even third. I mean, I'd be looking seriously at this kid by the mid rounds because I think he's got a high floor. So despite the fact that he's Russian, I think if he does, if he's a kid that ends up wanting to play in the NHL, develops properly, there's a really nice package there for a upside of a big physical third line winger that can chip in some points and be very, very physical and very strong defensively. So I like what I've seen from him. Obviously, the national team likes him a lot more. He plays on the first line on the national team. Then he goes back to junior and he's playing 13 minutes a night. So his stats aren't great. And again, if you didn't get to see him, he's not going to be on the radar of a lot of teams, I don't think. So for me, he's a real sleeper. And I'm not calling him the prospect of the week. There's probably prospects that had better weeks, but he's my sleeper of the week.
Fair enough. Yeah.
He looked good there. The motor really, really stood out. He never stopped. Like someone put a little crack in his cereal in the morning, sort of thing. Like he was going hard every shift there, and you didn't see much like high end offensive ability there. But if you're big and you play really hard, and if the skating comes, I mean, looks like he's got enough to go out there and bang around and cause havoc and get in the crease and drive guys bananas in the corners and that sort of thing. So, and it's too bad. The Russian thing obviously will hurt him, because if that's a Canadian or an American kid, if that's someone in North America that if he doesn't make the NHL, that you can put him in your American League system for a few years, you maybe be more inclined to take him, because that's the sort of guy with that motor you want to inject high motors into your prospect system. For me, I think the more competitive guys you have, the more guys that will be competitive, and if you're more competitive, you're going to get better. Now, it might be a little trickier to have that sort of fallback plan for him, because likely if he doesn't make the NHL, he stays at home. But you could do, just based on that, look like a good mid-round, sort of mid to late guy. You're big and you go hard, I have time for that sort of thing, because even if you don't make it, you're going to make other prospects in the organization better. Those habits do rub off. There's no shit, this kid's working his bag off. We better pick it up too, sort of thing. It's a Parker Kelly effect, right? I mean, he worked so hard at Sens Dev Camp for so many years in a row that so many guys just like, okay, work. And, he ended up developing into it, making an NHL career for himself because of how hard he worked. And
Pizzetta, same thing.
No, yeah, it's a great thing. It's a great thing to have. If you have a guy that makes it because he works hard and he wants it, that's a guy that you can find a role for somewhere in the organization.
That's it.
Well, there's guys. The Russian national team loves him, obviously, because they had him on the first line in the tournament in November, and just here now, and he made a lot of plays. So there is some offensive skill there. I think in large part it's because I really like his hockey sense. What I studied 4 games and thinks the game very well, anticipates the play, made a lot of nice, like he probably created 3 or 4 other good chances that could ended up as goals. So I think what hurts him more than anything is that NHL scouts don't get to see him. You know, I think if he was at the U18s at the end of the year here, he'd be a third round pick at the draft all day. I mean, I don't know that I like 60 prospects more than this kid right now. I think that he's got everything that you need to play in the NHL. So the fact that he's Russian and the fact that he's not being exposed is going to hurt him as far as being drafted, but potential wise, floor wise, I think it's quite high. So that's why he's a sleeper, and that's why he's now on our list. And I don't know, we'll see how he plays the rest of the year, but you know, I don't be shocked if he doesn't even get picked in the draft, you know, and maybe we never hear this guy's name again, maybe, but I like what I see. So got to go with that, by that. And for me, I think he's probably there late in the draft. And I think he'd be a great pick for a team, because once you get 5th round on, you're just taking projects, you know. So to me, he'd be a fantastic pick anywhere from that point on.
It's tough. It's tough too, especially like with the Russians now. It's so hard because the team's got 7 picks only, right? And there's going to be a lot of guys that a lot of scouts from a lot of different areas like, and it's hard to invest 1 out of 7 into a player that you've never seen live, that you've only seen on video. That would be hard to do for a team. Now, the flip side to that is, because of that, you can probably get some good value on Russian players if you are confident enough to take them based off what you see on video. Because like you said, this is a guy who maybe based on his skill set alone belongs in the 3rd round or the middle part of the draft, but equally may not even end up getting picked at all because of certain factors that he has no control over. You know what I mean? So there's 2 sides to it, because it's really tough to gamble a high pick on someone you've never seen live. But again, if everyone's passing on the guys just for that reason, then Russia produces players. They produce players. So there's going to be Russians who from this draft who play in the NHL. So if you see one that you think might be it and you can get them late, why not?
Well, like, let's not discount Russian scouts too altogether here. Obviously, no, I mean, sure. It depends on the organization, but you know, I mean, most teams, or all of them, still have Russian scouts, and you know, if they trust that guy, like, you have to listen to your regional guys, right? I mean, there's guys picked every year. A lot of teams pick players that the head scout never saw. They, you know, the regional guys banging the table on him and says, hey, this guy, you know, typically they really got to like him if no one else has seen him, or like if the head scout hasn't seen him. But there's picks every year, or just about every team, that it's, you got to, that's why you have regional scouts, because you got to trust that they know what they're talking about. And, you know, if there's nobody that the head scout or the top crossover scout is absolutely says, we got to have him, then you'll go with the regional guy will be saying, look, man, we really should be picking this guy, you know, and okay, we'll take him. So a lot will be dependent on, you know, how much input the Russian scouts have with an organization. And if there's a couple of Russian scouts that see the same thing I do and agree with what I do, they're going there should be a team or two that will have the regional guy saying, hey, this guy. And I mean, scouting has changed a bit since the pandemic. There's more reliance on video scouting. Detroit took Buchelnikov a couple of years ago without seeing him, only scouting him on video in the second round. I mean, I put up a highlight video that would just knock your socks off. I mean, see how you could pass on him in the second round, but if it wasn't Detroit taking him and Stevie Y with his risky Russian picks, like remember when everyone said, "Oh, what's he doing taking Kucherov?" No one's taking Russians in the top 2 rounds. What's he doing taking a Russian goalie in the top 20? Vasilevsky? Wow, that takes a lot of guts. Well,
worked out okay.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Not bad.
Here he is again saying, "Hey."
He was told he was crazy for taking Seider that high too. I know he's not Russian, but
oh well,
yeah.
I had him top 8, so I didn't think it was crazy at all. But yeah, I mean, a lot of public lists had Seider 15 to 20 or something like that. But yeah, a lot of NHL teams. The public perception was that he was crazy to take Seider at 8, but no NHL scouts that I knew thought that was a crazy pick. A lot of them had him top 10.
Yeah.
And now we see that he was right. Listen, if any NHL scouts are watching this show, they might be putting Alexander Plasovsky on their draft watch list now. So maybe a steal for your team. You're welcome. Follow along the Recruits Draftcast for more potential steals. Another reason to subscribe. Why? How about that? So Alexander Plasovsky is our sleeper of the week. Great pick there, Grant. Rocco, we thank you for your time and your analysis as always. We'll see you next week, my friend. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right. So we are now on to our Habs prospect of the week. This player, the last name might be familiar, but it's going to get even more familiar. Florian Jacki has been on a tear recently. Talk to us about him, Grant.
Well, I mean, once again, it was difficult to pick a guy because, you could have picked back, you could have picked a few guys, but I decided to go with the flow. Flow. You get it?
Go Florian with the flow. I love
Jacki. It. Anyway, he, in a word, he's been on a tear. He has 12 goals in his last 15 games.
Hello.
If you can believe that. This is for a guy that was picked because he was going to be tough, that could fight fourth line, power forward type winger that can play an energy role. But I mean, guys told me last year, even though his point totals were lousy, that there's a lot more skill there than maybe the point totals were telling us. And I think we're starting to see that. Like he's already doubled his goal total and his point total from last year, which is quite impressive. But just like his brother, the deputy sheriff here is a late bloomer, and you can see by these highlights he's got a good shot. He can make plays. He can pass the puck. Buries the biscuit. His skating isn't that bad. Like you see him go around this guy here, nice dipsy doodle, and then stick her in there with a backhand. So he is not lacking skill. Just like Arber, he just keeps improving his game. And hey, doesn't matter when you develop, as long as you develop, and he is developing at a nice pace. Got to give him kudos for picking up his scoring pace and showing that he's more than just a big tough fourth line forward type. This ultimately, if the improvement keeps going over the next couple of years, he might even be, he might even find a middle line spot somewhere because he brings size and grit, which the Canadians could use in their top 9. In addition to, not just having guys on the fourth line, because you want them to play a fair bit, right? So, I mean, he's been a key part of the franchise going for its second OHL title in the last 3 years, and just so happened that his brother was on the OHL champion 2 years ago, so it's kind of a cool story, that the Jackeyes are taking. Well, it wasn't in Brantford, obviously. It was in Hamilton at the time with Arbor, but the Bulldogs franchise, anyways, is getting a full dose of Jackeye over the last 3 years, and been really impressed with him, with his progress. Just like his brother, he's coming along late and just keeps improving. And considering that he was picked a year older than most prospects last year, you wanted to see that jump this year. Like, he need to be an above average OHLer this year, and he's clearly he clearly is that. I mean, he's top line center on a first place team, right? That's pretty impressive jump for him, considering 2 years ago he wasn't even in the OHL. So I think he will likely go to Laval next year. I thought maybe you'd see him as an overage, considering that he's only going to haven't played 2 years in the OHL after this year, but he's got the size. I think his skill has improved enough. He's certainly tough enough to handle the AHL next year. So from a physical standpoint, he might be ready to play at the AHL level next year. So wouldn't surprise me if he made Laval out of camp, but there's going to be there's going to be a lot of good young talent in Laval next year, and it's not going to be easy to crack the team. And if he comes back as an overager, that's okay too. Going into the year, I figured, you'll see him play 2 more years in the OHL because last year was his first year, but not so sure about that now. He might be somebody, in part because of that type of player, might be someone that Laval would like, because there's going to be a lot of skill there. And, it's going to be a young team. They'll need some guys to help police and maybe protect some of the other guys. For reasons such as that, there might be a spot for him, just needing that type of player in the lineup. So also, I guess, depending on Laval, presuming that they're going to make the playoffs, and if they go on a decent run, and if Brantford doesn't go to the Memorial Cup, their season will end, because Laval, the playoffs start later in the AHL than they do in junior hockey. So maybe he gets a look in Laval before the end of the year too. That's not something that I would have predicted at the start of the year, but just like Arbor, the improvement curve is just sky high. So who knows? He might be. And again, he plays a style of game that you kind of covet in a tough playoff series. So he might be someone that you see at Laval before the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, it's looking like great value for a fourth rounder right now.
Yeah.
I remember when the draft happened, a lot of people were kind of mad because he just got picked because of his last name, right? It's all that. No. Like this is a genuinely good player. And I remember in the Habs draft video that they posted, I think it was Nick Bobrov called him a unicorn.
Unicorn? Yeah.
So
Nick calls, there's always 2 or 3 guys that he calls unicorns, but there's more unicorns in the world than Nick. Well, Nick obviously knows there's a lot more unicorns out there than people are aware of. But
yeah. He might have found one.
Yeah,
he might have found one there.
He might actually, be a unicorn. So,
very exciting.
for fourth round pick, all you can, if he can play a bottom line role in the NHL,
excellent.
That's what you want out of a 4th round pick at best. Usually, 3rd rounder's looking really good too. Fowler, right? So, the top guys get Reinbacher. Obviously, is the key, but At one point, you wondered, well, they might only get one NHLer out of this draft class, maybe 2, but I like his floor. Like we've been talking about floor. I could see him playing a 4th line role in the NHL all day. He's got all of the facets that you want in a 4th line player, or maybe a 3rd line player. So I think he's who knows? Like I know Tony has had the conversations a few times about Arbor moving to the wing. Can you imagine those two?
Ash brothers,
those two and Pizzetta on a line together. Man. Just send them out there and just crash bang. They lead the league in hits every friggin' game. So
just for morbid curiosity, I'd love to see it. Just once, at least once, just make it happen. That'd be so fun. Yeah. But that's it. Florian Xhekaj, very exciting stuff. And again, this draft class, it's looking better by the day. I mean, Yevgeny Volokin, people might not know that name, but he's in the KHL right now. He's a goaltender. Phenomenal stats. Like just
another shutout.
Very, very good stats. Bogdan Knishkov, another defenseman, right? Again, playing fantastic. So that 2023 draft class for the Habs is looking better and better. Florian Xhekaj being a part of that. Yeah.
Volokin's funny. I went and looked at some games because like you said, like you look at the stats and it's like, wow.
Nuts.
I dug a little deeper into it. That league is phenomenally low scoring. And that team, my goodness, they don't give up much. Like I was trying to get save highlights, and I must have went through 4 games. And I was still waiting for a big save from him. Everything was from the outside, and nothing in the slot, nothing. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, geez, I could be here for 5 hours trying to get it together, a video of great saves that he makes. So, the jury's out on him as far as I don't know how good he is, to be honest with you, because the team defense, that Mamonte Rugri there, they've got a brick wall in front of them. So, but you can't argue with the stats. They're really good. Now the other kid, they had 2 goalies that were both drafted. The Philly guy who started the year with them, but his save percentage in the 8 games that he played was 950. Even better. So that just tells you just how good they are defensively, right?
Yeah.
So we'll reserve it. We won't get overly excited about him yet, but I mean, he picked up another shutout this week, and he doesn't let in many goals. So that's a start, right?
Exactly.
That's the key to having a good goalie prospect is he doesn't let in goals. So we'll see how he develops, but certainly from a just on the surface, looking at the stats, for a late round pick again, you can't argue with it. He looks like he was a dandy pick too.
Exactly. Well, that'll about wrap it up for us this week. Let us know in the comments again if you think this draft class could be the best defenseman draft class of all time. Jury's still out, and we're going to have to wait about 10 years to find out, but it's fun to speculate, and we know it's going to be a good one anyways. So we'd love to hear your comments about it and who you think the best defenseman will be to come out of this draft class. That I'm excited to hear about. As always, we invite you to subscribe, leave us a like, help us support the channel, and go check out recruits.ca, right? There are player profiles with deeper analysis there and scout comments, right, Grant? I mean, you could talk a bit about that more in detail, maybe.
Oh, just I wanted to correct you about the of all time, the defense class. Like,
maybe,
I know you're a young lad, but there was the NHL did exist before the turn of the century, and there were some pretty good draft classes, defense draft classes. But we did have a look at it from 2000 on.
That's it. No, we didn't look before.
No, and I don't know for sure, but I mean, off the top of my head, there were some pretty good. There were a few good draft classes in the 70s and 80s, and the Brian Leach class and so forth. But yeah, certainly. I mean, I've been following the draft since the 70s. And not many spring to mind that have a more promising group of defensemen than this one. So I'm really excited about it.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, folks, for tuning in. Thank you to Rocco Zappia. Thank you to Grant McCagg. We'll see you next week. Take care.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, Recruits Draftcast on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.